Pricing is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so, yes, in as much as you're short-sighted to make a quarter work, you want to elevate the year and the next year and the next year.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
It's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the soaring relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving. Today is the third episode of our season of Pricing Executives. We're going to do 5 to 10 episodes in a row to learn how pricing executives think and hopefully figure out how to get you promoted. Today, our guest is Chris Amenechi. Here are 3 things you want to know about Chris before we start. He has been in the airline industry his entire career. He actually spent 20 years at United/Continental. He has a side job as a managing director at an investment and consulting company. He is currently VP of Pricing and Revenue Management for Copa Airlines, and I am fascinated by airline pricing. So welcome, Chris.
Hey, thank you. It's a privilege to be here. Appreciate it.
How did you get into pricing?
Well, interesting story. At the time, or in the airline business, it was called yield management at the time I got there. It was pricing, yield management, or revenue management. And that was considered trendy at the time. And the way to figure out how to maximize revenues. The airline business, I guess, before I got into it, I'd heard about these complicated ways of making money because one price did not make it happen in terms of profitability. And of course, in college, we're like, well, there's got to be a better way to do it. It's got to be very scientific, very mathematical. And so an opportunity came and I took it.
Okay. And so first off, what's the difference between revenue management and yield management? Is there a difference?
Yes and no. Well, that's a pretty bad answer, but I would say this. I think one is a bit of an old school situation. One is the proper way to do it. So yield management was the idea brought that, I will call it the old school way of mentioning it, was to say, how much could I get out of a customer, the max I could get out of a customer by managing the inventory we had. So what was the max yield I can get on an airplane? And that to the practitioners was the best thing ever. But that's not the end of the day. You got to make a profit, right? And you've got to maximize the entire network of an airline. If it was just one flight, then you had all the demand in the world, then you'll maximize yield, right? However, if you wanted to get the optimal revenue point, you've got to get into some revenue management, which means there's some loss leaders, there's some cheaper prices, there's some more expensive prices based on all the demand profiles you have and the customer profiles you have. And so revenue management is the idea of pricing and allocation of inventory and combining the two in an optimal way to generate the most for the system of that airline.
Nice. So in my mind, I always thought yield management was, I want to manage the revenue of a single flight, we'll say.
Right.
And revenue management might be more, I want to manage the revenue I can get from a single customer.
The other way around. I want to manage the most, and in today's language, I want to manage the most I can get out of the wallet of a customer.
Right. Fascinating.
Which becomes, so what's the best optimal price I know the customer is willing to pay? And that's the new world we need to get into. And therefore, that becomes the best revenue you can get out of the customer at that time. But you got to think about long term as well.
Yeah. I promise we're not going to talk about airline pricing the whole time, but I really am curious about some of these things. I heard that airlines were not profitable until they started all of these fees that we see added on to flights nowadays. How much of the profit comes from the fees?
Good question. I would say that's not an overwhelming truth. I would say in the United States, it depends on the in the life cycle of the airline. In the United States, the really big airlines who had grown in the good old days, it was difficult to make a profit because of the cost structure. And they were in business for 30, 40 years. And you build up a significant overhead like any other business. And so to make money with competitors all over the place, instead of raising prices like some businesses do, they basically, prices were coming down, your infrastructure costs are going up, so it's difficult to make money. There were other airlines that were newer airlines that could make money at those low fares because they're a low cost structure, hence the term LCC or low cost carrier. Southwest is one of them, Allegiant, Spirit, all of these guys had come about and were able to make a buck.
Yeah, the first one I thought of that way was People's Express, I think.
Yes, people, well, if you want to go back to that time, yes, there was Laker Airways, which was probably in some cases, one will say the originator of the low-cost transatlantic business. People's Express was a huge game changer for the U.S. domestic market. And then they got into the international business as well. So the $39 fares for a big hub carrier was sort of the idea. They're not really hub, but they were hub.
Yeah.
So you have that. But now I think what you're seeing is with consolidation, restructuring of the business, restructuring of the finances of the airlines, and we're going through that now again. You're seeing airlines make money. Size matters. Also, there are smaller airlines that make money. In fact, the most profitable airlines are not the big airlines. They're the smaller airlines. Copa, for example, is one of the most profitable airlines. Ryanair, EasyJet in Europe. So they figured out the way to make money. Now, let's get into the ancillary piece, which is what you talked about, the fees. Yes, everybody in the world, whether it's the phone companies, your cable companies, they're able to restructure their rate structures, right? So they would give you the minimal package and then they'll go up to the big packages. And then if you wanted anything additional, it was your choice. It was a customer choice model and it was an upsell model. The airlines were still doing one price fit all. That doesn't work. And so, yes, the idea that you would give the customer the choice as to the service they want or that the service you were offering was the right thing to do. And yes, that has helped increase profitability. And for the big guys, it's a big piece of the profitability.
Yeah, I remember I was teaching pricing when all the airlines decided they were going to start charging for checked luggage.
Yes.
And I used that as an example in my class on people thinking something's fair or not. You would not believe how upset everybody was over that one issue. It was amazing.
Yeah, I would say you would expect something like that, but I want to take you back to similar exercises that happened. And this is just a structural change in time. If you remember with phone bills, right, before we even got into mobile phones, at one time, it was just they're just these big monopolies, right? And whatever they charged, you paid and it was regulated. And then it got deregulated, but there were still these rate charges that you paid for a long distance call. Then it started to morph into, daytime, nighttime, international. And now it is data and it's got into all of these different packages in time. Everybody's still pissed off, but it is over time, it has become part and parcel of human nature in the world to just accept phones as something that you do, and this is what you pay for, right? And so you just go to the cheapest provider or you stick with a provider you trust. Same thing happened to cable, right? You had one price and you got this many channels and that was it. And it kept going up, right? Yep. How come people didn't get pissed off then? Now it is basic, it's super, and you've got all kinds of different variations of price. But everyone has gotten used to it. Doesn't mean they're not pissed off, they've gotten used to it.
Yep.
Similarly, whoever started doing bag fees was going to get hit. That was just a natural phenomenon. You'd have the courage to do so. All right. And that's sort of what has happened. If you look at the car business, everybody has stuck, the big car companies stuck to a certain model of pricing. And then you have the new entrants that have said, no, we're going to do it differently. And we're even going to price higher. And we're going to change the way we model the car and the way we build the car. Well, people are willing to pay for that. How come they're not pissed off?
Yep. Well, so the other example I love to use is still in the airline industry. And if you go back 10 years prior to that, remember when they started charging for meals? They stopped giving you free meals.
Yes.
Right. And so we get used to it. We become, it's now acceptable.
Desensitized. Right.
Desensitized. Yeah.
Yes.
And so even the checked luggage, people are not upset about it anymore. I mean, they're a little bit upset, but nothing like they were when it first happened.
I'm not absolving the airline business of being the smartest marketers in this respect. And I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of heat for saying that, but I've always said it across the board, we're pretty bad marketers. And the idea for us was, if we're going to introduce these things, we should have done it in a customer appealing way, make it the customer's idea, right? Like some other industries do, and they market it appropriately. The problem we have, and we had at the time, most of us didn't have the kind of money to go into that sort of consumer branding perspective, which no one will understand and no one cares about, but that's just the fact. Yeah. But if you just did the price, those who were going to pay because that's part of the business. And if you're going to travel, you got to carry luggage, right? And so you just charge the price and that was it.
So could you imagine had you not said we're going to charge for checked luggage, but you said we're going to give a discount to anybody who doesn't check luggage?
So the beauty of all of this is that the conventional wisdom is, oh yes, if you always give a discount, things work very well. That's just the best thing to do. No, you can't think you'll be out of business, right? And so one of the things you'll find is that what customers say and what customers do are very different, right? And there's always the idea, oh, we're going to follow everything the customer says. That is not the case. Customers behave differently.
Yeah. So please, Chris, don't imagine that I was saying we were going to give a discount.
No.
What we would do is we would raise prices by $25.
That's
and
right.
then we would give a discount to anybody who didn't want to check luggage.
Absolutely. Yes. But unfortunately in our business, you cannot do that. If you try to do that and the other airlines don't do it.
Yeah, it's the competition thing. Absolutely. Okay. Yes. I've had so much fun just talking about airline pricing, but what I really want to talk to you about is career and people and skills. Right. And so let's start with your career. What do you think helped you get promoted to be a VP of pricing? What were the tricks, the important
question? I wish I could give you the recipe, but I'm sure most of us will figure out a way to say that. I would say the two most important things were just a dedication to be a bit of an innovator, a bit of a expert, and also a bit of a team player. You've got to be able to do all three. And so let me start with just being an expert. Yes, the natural tendencies you have in terms of skills and capabilities. And so really understanding your business, knowing what your competitor does, knowing what other industries do. You're not one-dimensional. You need to be multi-dimensional. That's one. Two, an innovator means you are able to use other skills to influence the output of the expertise that you have. And that means, yes, bringing some science into some of this, bringing technology into it, changing processes, reducing cost of performing the job, and also building the right team around you, and championing your team sometimes when no one else believes in it. You've got to be able to take people, show them things can happen, and success can come from the ground up. It's difficult for some folks to do that, they always want the best of the best, but I believe in a diverse team. And I believe in a hungry team, and a hungry team will always get you to where you need to go with the right guidance. So
I think all three of
sorry.
those were great. Can we dive into each one just a little bit?
Sure.
And so if we start with the expert, one of the things I find, and I'll use the word pricing professionals, meaning people who are in the role of pricing in an organization or in an industry.
Yes.
They seem to be really good at their specific industry or their specific company, but they don't see outside their industry that much.
Right.
How do you advise or get people to look at what's going on in other industries or other businesses that aren't what we do today?
Yeah, I would say just as a matter of practice, living life every day, well, I'm talking about pricing here, but as you go to the grocery store, if you're really passionate and you're an expert about that piece of the business and you're a pricer generally, you're going to analyze everything you see. You may not care necessarily as a shopper to say, you know what, I'm just going to negotiate this to death, but you're going to be fascinated with how did I come up with $3 a pound, right? And why is it this and why is it that? And you're going to ask those questions. And you brought in your skill sets by connecting some of these folks in these industries and ask why. Why is it this way? I'll give you a very specific example around ancillaries that's done very well in the travel businesses, the cruise lines. One of the things that generates a ton of money for the cruises, it's not necessarily the biggest profit maker, but photographs, all emotional buying. And if you ever look at your bill at the end of the day at a cruise line, you're going to be outstanding as to how much you just spent on taking pictures, right? And the answer is, well, why are customers so, I'm using a personal term, gullible enough to spend that much? They can take these pictures themselves, right? All the selfies, even with all of the technology, you're still paying that much to take those pictures on these cruises, right? It's an experience. It's not about economic pricing. It's really about behavioral pricing, right? Yeah. And so knowing the context of closing the deal is important. And being very curious is essentially needed to know why people do what they do. From a customer perspective, from an industry perspective, and a competitive perspective, you've got to also look at other industries to see the reactions that are happening, right? Pharmaceutical pricing, why is it the way it is, right? The airline business is very dynamic. Why is it the way it is? The phone business is even more dynamic. Why is it the way it is? And the other piece is to understand your distribution pipeline, follow the money, right? Everyone always says, follow the money. Okay, go follow the money. Why is it that the time the customer gets it to the time the product is created, the difference between that, is it wasteful additive cost, right? Is it just rent cost, or is it true cost? And if it is, then you start to understand where you should be pricing and how you need to move the industry appropriately, right, in a competitive environment.
I think that was a fabulous answer. Let's jump into innovator for a second. And when I think of innovation and the things that you described technology-wise, it's almost like we're trying to change the way the company does something today. As we might need to automate it, we might need to put in a new tech system, something. Right. And causing change in a company is really hard.
Absolutely.
It feels like it's a leadership influence type issue. Is that the way you're thinking of that as well?
Yes, well, there are two sides to it. One, you have companies where by nature, the leadership needs to be conservative. They're caretakers of the value, of the basic value of the company and the profitability of the company. So they've got that fiduciary right. And so risk is not necessarily what they do best, right? And you've got to manage around that to make sure it's the risk-averse nature of most managements. There is a window that says it's not that risky. We can do it. You've got to pitch it the right way. I would say I was always very successful about that because the concepts that you're trying to bring to the table are complicated, so difficult to explain. And you've got to bring it down to the way a 5-year-old will understand it, which is not easy when you're dealing with price and algorithms, AI, technology, and you've got a CEO is looking at you like, what the hell are you talking about? Talk to me like I'm 5 years old. If you can't sell me on that, then it's risky.
Right. Well, what we have works, and so why would I change it?
Exactly. Why will I add more people? Why will I take the chance of decreasing people and spending more money on capital to do this? You've got to, all the situations are different, but you just have to bring the pitch appropriately. Whatever the pushbacks are, you go back and do your homework and you come back with a second pitch. If you believe in it that much, right? And you know it's going to work, then that's what you're paying your price leader for, is to help you make money and to convince you that it's going to make money. It's no different than trying to get an investor to invest, right? It's the same thing.
I think what you just said was really key in this area. If you believe in it enough and you think it's going to work, then you got to keep trying, right?
Yes.
You got to keep pushing.
Yes. And, I've gotten a lot of no's in my time.
Haven't we all? Well, and so that brings us directly back to the third one you said was the team. And so as you put your team together, I want everybody who's listening to this to figure out how they're going to go get promoted.
Yes.
And so who do you promote? You're looking across your team. You say, oh, this is the type of person who's going to get promoted in my team.
Yeah. I mean, this area gets into all sorts of touchy issues. You naturally want to promote the person who compliments you. And when I say
compliments or as in says nice things, or as in those things you don't do?
Well, when I say compliment, let me put the context of that. Meaning, as a leader, you have certain skill sets. And those skill sets, someone who has the same and drives in the same manner as you do, will naturally be a favorite. And if the demeanor is very much like yours, you naturally gravitate to that person. That's just normal human beings. But you have to have the discipline to be a bit more critical in that sense and say, look, okay, I know this person. Yeah, I'm going to promote this person. Certainly everybody that comes to my group, I will promote all of them because they're like me, and therefore I want everybody in the department to be like me. It is the natural fallacy of every leader. Right? And then you find if everyone is like you, at the end of the day, you don't progress because you never have that counter thought and you're always in a one-track zone. So you've got to then say, look at the spread of the folks. Who is the grinder, who does the work, who follows the directions, questions a couple of things. I'm not saying the person is not smart, but they're a grinder. That's the person who gets stuff done. Mm-hmm. Right? Who's your finisher? That's who that person is, right? Then you've got the folks who shake up the system. And sometimes you need those sorts of people to balance the team, and you go get someone like that because that person is going to shake up the status quo and help you move forward, right? Then you've got the facilitator, the person who listens to that innovator and also knows how to work the grinder to get stuff done, right? 3 key skill sets that you need in your team. And, if you had a team of 200 and you needed 4 leaders to move a team of 200, you need to have the balance of those guys, right? Because if you are the driver as the leader all the time, then you're going to need these guys to work together.
Right.
And so you need some form of a balance to make sure you can't have everybody driving, right? Who's going to get stuff done? And unfortunately, a lot of teams fail because there are enough people who get stuff done.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, and so I need to know which one of those people get promoted. The facilitator, the driver.
It all depends. It all depends on what you need at the time.
So you're saying you need representation from each of the 3 in the management levels.
Yes.
Okay. And it seems like by the time they get to your level, you need to understand all 3.
Absolutely. You need to have a balance of all 3, I believe, right? in most of the leaders. Which is why if you look at, if you study some of the organizational trends we used to have back in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, you need to, the GE model is to rotate you across everything, put you in different scenarios, and build you out in a well-rounded manner. So now you're ready to go run a business. Well, in today's world, you don't have time for that. You don't have those sort of companies anymore. And so either you're going to build that skill set driving a startup, you're going to build that skill set in a mid-sized company. And if you're in a large company, those rotations are not happening as much.
Right.
And so you're going to have to create that within the group that you're going to grow up in, if that's the way that company works. And then you need to make the move yourself to push yourself out of your comfort zone into other groups where you have to be a facilitator as a leader because you're not the expert, right? Or where you need to be the grinder because you're not the innovator, you're not the facilitator.
Yeah, I think the thing I like about what you just said the most, though, is you have to push yourself outside your own comfort zone.
Absolutely.
You got to figure out how you're going to grow. You have to take responsibility for yourself.
Yes.
So, nice.
Yes.
Chris, we've already gone over time. I knew I was going to love this conversation, but I have to end with this question. What's one piece of pricing advice you would give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Wow. I mean, that's a big question with many different variations of an answer. But I would say, pricing is not a sprint; it's a marathon. And so, yes, in as much as you're short-sighted to make a quarter work, you want to elevate the year and the next year and the next year. So your strategy needs to be sound, needs to be adaptable. But the whole idea is to get your product, depending on what it is, to be at the top of the marketplace.
Nice. Absolutely perfect answer. Chris, thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
I'm on LinkedIn, and it's the quickest, easiest way today to reach anybody, and I'm open and not closed. So you can just reach me on LinkedIn and shoot me a note.
Okay, I will make sure your name is spelled correctly in the show notes so people can find you on LinkedIn.
Thank you.
All right, episode 83, all done. Would you please leave us a review? They're very, very valuable to us, and I also said that I would start reading some of these. Quirky Z on iTunes wrote, "What an incredible value. Seeing a new episode of Impact Pricing in my feed is one of the best parts of my week. Mark delivers structured, insightful interviews with fantastic guests that really get me thinking about how I can go make an impact. Thank you, Mark." So please join Quirky Z, leave us a review. Also, don't forget to join our community at championsofvalue.com. That's where you'll see all of the free content I put out, memes, blogs, videos, podcasts. If you have any questions or comments about the podcast or about pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.